today, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Jacquelyn Malcolm, Vice Chancellor of Information Technology from the Minnesota State System. Dr. Malcolm brings nearly 20 years of distinctive higher education experience and has been a leader both at the campus and system level. She is committed to delivering complex information systems that support access to affordable and equitable education and increase the economic viability of students. She is an active thought leader in the higher education technology space through her engagement with EduCause and other IT community organizations. She also teaches a graduate course in crisis communication. She has a bachelor's degree from Drexel University, a master's from George Washington University, and a doctorate from Delaware State University. And it was our pleasure to have her part of our advisory board when she was in Buffalo. Thanks for all your contributions and thanks for coming back to share with us your wisdom and experience. Please go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for everyone who is on the call today to spend a little bit of time, the next little bit of the hour, to have a conversation around non-traditional pathways to leadership. I will leave a little bit of time at the end because I do want to answer your questions and just have a conversation around what are some of those things that might be concerning you or things that you feel would help bolster where you are in your maybe non-traditional path to leadership. I'll tell you a little bit about sort of how my pathway started. When I got into higher education, I was actually a freshman in college and went to Drexel University undergrad and very, very much fell in love with working in the higher ed space. I wound up working for the financial aid office as a work study student for a number of years. Went on to get my, and my degree actually is in marketing. So if you want to talk about a vice chancellor of IT who has a background in marketing communications. Went on to get my master's in project management from George Washington University, and some decades later went on to get my doctorate in educational leadership from Delaware State University. And so for me, where I fell into really my non-traditional pathway was when I was working for an institution in Washington, D.C., and my leadership became the head of IT. And part of that, I was beginning to market a portal system. And there really wasn't anyone who was there to manage the portal from the IT side. So I raised my hand. And that's one of the things that's really important as you try to expose yourself to new things is really how can you raise your hand and participate in those things that come your way, even those that might not be as traditional to your path. So I raised my hand, and next thing I know, I'm building a system using Boolean logic and working with Oracle DBAs and Banner DBAs, Banner's and student information system, and off I went. And what I found was that there was a real love of information technology and all that it can do and all that it helps to support our students going and getting to graduation, right? So one of those most important things is raising your hand. And, and some say, I have my lane, I've got what I do within my own organization. For me, I found the greatest opportunity to get exposure to things that might not have intuitively come my way is to have raised my hand, right? Raising your hand to be on a committee, raising your hand to work within your community, volunteering. I do a lot of work with EduCause, and that's all on a volunteer basis. And part of it is allow myself the exposure to the particular subject area or initiative. But part of that in raising my hand to participate is an opportunity for me to give back as well. And so it's exceptionally important to understand making sure you have the capacity to raise your hand, making sure your boss knows that you want to raise your hand is very, very important. And I will also say too, not everything is necessarily going to come with a pay raise. And I know that might sound like unfortunate words for some, but sometimes the value comes today and the payoff comes tomorrow. And so making sure you understand what value you're getting out of raising your hand and participating in a particular initiative, whether, like I said, it's a committee or another volunteer activity as well. And so that's something that I would absolutely encourage anyone who wants to really get to a higher level leadership space is to expose yourself to different things, and those things that are common to your subject matter area and those things that are not. And so if you're looking to get into IT, let's just say, you might be looking at different ways of really getting more soft skills, right? You might be looking at participating in a project where maybe the network is the data center is going through a redo. Maybe you can participate in that. Maybe it's being on a Senate committee. Maybe it's being on another organizational committee within your organization. So definitely raise your hand. Again, I come from a non-traditional background, right? So my pathway is very much not on the straight and narrow, especially into IT leadership. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a DBA. I'm not an infrastructure person. Who I am really is a strategic leader with really strong technical acumen. And I'm a firm believer, even with those that I do my work with and that are on my teams, that I always say we can teach technology to you. We always can do that. And so what we want to be able to do is get those folks that are from varying areas, diverse areas, from STEM fields, from non-STEM fields. I'm a business person. My background is in business, because that creates diversity of thought and ideation in a way in which we're not all thinking the same way, right? And so making sure you really understand that it doesn't have to be traditional, and sometimes you might take a lateral role because you're looking to gain some other skill set. Sometimes it's moving up, and sometimes it's moving verticals and how you have transferable skills. So always making sure too that it's okay, right? It's okay to move verticals. It's okay to not necessarily do those things that seem intuitive all the time, because they're not bad things. And what I will say is, with me having a varied background, so my background is in IT, marketing, communications, and enrollment management. And when I came to Buffalo State College, that job, my skill set was wrapped into one job, which was really like finding a needle in a haystack. But what it does for me in the current job that I have is really influence and help me understand the areas of business that I have to collaborate with, right? So when I'm thinking about a CRM and working with my admissions folks, I know what they're talking about. I know what their pressures are. I have really good purview into what their space and their world looks like within higher education on that particular campus. And so it helps me be a better partner. One thing I will say about IT that we're not a utility. We really are a partner who needs to be at the table. And a lot of times we're not, and we need that voice at the table because we are the partner. We are really, all things are predicated on teaching and learning come from technology. And so it's really important to be able to understand, and you can create your own path, that the path doesn't have to be traditional. And I always say that even as a CIO, I can get to a presidency. I don't have to be in a chair, faculty, dean, provost position to get to a presidency. And I can get to that presidency in a much different way. And I think in the higher ed vertical, we're seeing more of folks that are coming from non-traditional pathways into the higher level C-suite leadership space. The other thing that's going to be exceptionally important as you make your journey is don't forget others. Don't forget helping others. I couldn't have gotten here if it weren't for the support and help and from others, and people really taking the time to pour into me. I remember one day I was pulling a log for my system, and I just was having a lot of trouble. And I sat down with a network person and I said, I need your help in getting this log pulled for me. And he said to me, you know what, I'm going to help you do it. And it was really one of the first times where someone really was willing to help teach me in a space that at the time I had little expertise. And so I always say, don't forget those who are walking this journey with you, whether it's your staff, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's your friends who are looking to get into a particular space, and you really want to make sure that as you move, that you are also helping others along your journey. And it's exceptionally important. There's a lot of teaching and learning, and my belief in how I do teaching and learning in my space, because I feel like it's ongoing, is that it's not didactic. And what didactic means, it's not one way, right? It's really reflexive. It's transformative. It's a way in which we learn from each other. And I say I'm in this leadership space, but I'm constantly learning from others, whether it's my staff, whether it's from other areas within the organization. I want to be continually in that space so I can not only learn, but I can help others learn as well. Professional development is absolutely integral to keeping yourself abreast what's going on in your space. But it's also important that you allow your staff to partake of those opportunities as well. I just got back from EDUCAUSE's 2021 annual conference in Philadelphia, and you come back energized. You come back with great ideas that you've received from working with your colleagues and doing presentations. You can bring them back to your own organizations and really create a fever around and passion around your work and moving things forward. So those are wonderful things to be able to think about. But again, as you grow, make sure you're also taking the time to help others grow as well. Part of that is mentorship for yourself, even in high-level leadership roles, but for others as well. And a lot of the work that I've done is really making sure that I'm aligned with mentors and understanding what their goals are for that mentoring relationship, because I want to make sure that they're getting out of that relationship what they're seeking as well. So I always make sure that those who I mentor are always in a space where they feel like they're getting from me what they're seeking from a professional perspective. And also to making sure that you want to make sure that you're going to have experiences within your discipline, but experiences outside of your discipline. Part of my job encompasses a lot of things. It's IT, absolutely. Surprisingly, I do a lot of marketing communications in my role. I do finance within my role as well. I do a lot of networking. Sometimes it means fundraising, depending on what project you're working on, or working with funders and knowing how to work with them. And so you begin to understand the different areas that you really need to make sure that become a part of your discipline and your expertise level. Something that is very, very near and dear to me as a underrepresented minority in the IT space is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I live those principles. I want to make sure that they're woven within the positions that I oversee, and making sure that all voices rise, right? They're not just at the table, that we can have conversation around that. And one of the ways in which, again, you gain differing experiences is raising your hand, and not just raising your hand in your own disciplinary space. Doing those things that are a little uncomfortable for you, pushing you. For some, it's public speaking, and doing more of it is actually what makes you a little bit more comfortable in that space. For others, it might be something else. Raise your hand to participate in those spaces to get yourself some really strong experience in those areas. Earlier on, I mentioned soft skills. My role is less about what I do from a technology perspective, but more of what I do from a collaboration perspective and working with my colleagues and my staff. It's relationship building as well. Those are things that traditionally in the IT space, 10, 15 years ago, they weren't necessarily skills that a CIO needed to have. They were truly looked at as a technical role on campus, right? You're a technician, that's what you do. You're working on servers, you're building programs, nowadays, potentially writing APIs, things like that. But really making sure, right, that you have all of those skills. And if you don't, and if you see those gaps in your skill set, understanding how you go and obtain those skills so you can fill those gaps, right? And so that's exceptionally important as you grow your career, as you journey along, and making sure that you're growing as an individual. The other thing too, I always say to my staff is that if you're not looking for a leadership role, that is okay. Frequently we put really, really exceptionally great employees, great workers in leadership roles when it's not necessarily best suited for them. They are exceptional workers, they're great in their space, but potentially don't want to necessarily be in leadership. And I don't want to ever assume that someone ever wants to be in a leadership role. But in the event that they do, I'm here to support. And in the event that they're comfortable with where they are, I want to be able to support them with where they are. It might be a lived experience as to why they want to stay where they want to stay. It might be a current life experience. Maybe they feel comfortable where they are because they're raising a young family, and that their role currently gives them the flexibility they need. But I'm here to support all of them, and I never want to ever presume that a person needs to be in a leadership role, and certainly don't want to ever put a person in that space if they don't want to be. But being supportive of all, like I said, is exceptionally important. I'm going to cycle back around to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and living that. And so I'm here in St. Paul, Minnesota, and part of the Twin Cities. And as you know, George Floyd and what happened there in Minneapolis, and a lot of organizations in that moment created really, really strong DEI statements. And they were really great, strong advocate DEI statements. But it has to be more than that, right? You have to live that experience. You've got to make sure that you are truly helping all boats rise. And so, as you do your work, think about how you can be an ally. As a woman in IT, I always say to folks, this is not just about saying only women can support women. We need our male counterparts to be advocates for us in this space. But also, how do we become advocates for others who look like us, who don't look like us in this space, and being supportive of that. The other part of what's really important is a sense of belonging. Frequently, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but that sense of belonging is equally as important. And as you journey into these roles and into differing organizations, you really want to make sure that you are creating a space, a safe and transparent space for your staff. They really do feel like they are a part of that organization, that they're not just an employee who kind of traverses in and out and does their work, that they really do feel like they have a place in the space within your organization. And so those are really important components as you journey through your pathway. I know a majority of folks on this call are coming from the DSA program, and being able to be a part of that board was exceptionally important, and it was pivotal because the stance that your chair took was, how do we create a board in which we have industry leaders who get to influence pedagogy, who get to help us with internships? How do we pull all of that in to help support you all in this program, and therefore create really great leaders in this program? As we know, data science and analytics is relatively new in its nomenclature, right? Not in its work, but in its nomenclature. And it is a hot thing right now. And we need great leaders in this space. And so how do we all help you all along to be able to understand that as you are working and are in a space in education and become theorists in the space, how do we match up that theory with that practical, right? So those industry leaders and the influence of those industry leaders is really a really nice pairing. And kudos to Joaquin on really taking that approach from his advisory board, because that's the way in which we create networking opportunities for students. That's how we create internship opportunities for students. That's how we get you all into positions of leadership and being influencers in your space, so that way you can help those other classmates, others in your field, get to the spaces that they want to be able to get to as well. And so that's some of the work that I do, right? I participate in community organizations. Some are IT driven, and some are solely just from a community standpoint. And so for me, as I give back into the higher ed space, again, I mentor. I'm constantly talking to my staff about ways in which they want to take their careers. And that's something else that I think a lot of times we as leaders don't want to have conversation around, is that, I do want my staff, if they want to grow well beyond where my organization can take them, I want to help them do that. I definitely don't want to push them out, but I do want to help them if they feel like they want to learn and grow in a larger capacity that takes them beyond this organization. And I think that's what great leadership is really about, right? Is how do we support everyone on their journey to where they want to go? And again, I was the person who was able to partake of those folks around me who were willing to do that work with me. And I never forget, I had a consultant that I worked with many, many, many years ago. And I had told him that I had accepted this position here at Minnesota State as vice chancellor. And he says to me, I would have never thought that you would be in this space. And I said to him, I said, it is because of people like you who believed in me, who supported me, that I'm able to be here now. And so that giving back piece is something that I will always do, no matter where I am in the leadership space. I think the other thing that's really important as you make your journey through potentially a non-traditional pathway is aligning yourself with organizations and leaders that really can help grow and serve you well and support where you're trying to go with your career. I will say that, the chancellor over the Minnesota state system is an exceptional leader. I'm able to do my work. I am able to partake of his advice and his guidance. He is very savvy when it comes to the IT space and the higher ed space, has been a previous president, and has grown up really through the academic ranks. And it's someone that I can look up to. It's someone that is a great guide, but is also someone who allows me to really be a leader in my space. And I don't ever feel like I am unheard, that my voice is small. I have been here only for 3 months, and that's what I've already garnered from him from a leadership perspective. And so when you're interviewing for positions, please make sure you understand that not only are they interviewing you, but you're interviewing them. And you want to interview them for fit. Could I see myself working here? Do I believe that person's a good leader? Do your homework, talk to your colleagues, see what's being said about the organization in which you want to align yourself with, because it will become a part of who you are for the next, however long you choose to stay. And so these are really important decisions as we think about the impacts of our jobs on our families, as we think about the impact on our jobs on our personal lives. As I've grown through my career, I have really tried to keep self-care top of mind. So that's also something that I'm constantly working at. I don't necessarily always do a great job, but knowing when it's time to leave every day, to get home to your family, to get home to do the things you love to do, whether it's get outside and ride a bike or go walking or go to a really great restaurant, enjoying the weather, whatever that might be for you. Self-care is really, really important. And to not lose sight of that as you move yourself up into leadership roles, it will be exceptionally important as you amass more, in areas. And, when I was at Buffalo State College, I had 225 staff that I was managing on varying levels. And so it was really important for them to know where I stood on self-care, especially during COVID, which was a really, really hard time and continues to be a hard time for staff. And letting them know that, you know what, I know you're working from home, but this is not the way this traditionally looks like. And I need you to get up from your computer at lunchtime. I need you to take that 15-minute break. Even if you just get away from your computer and sit on the couch, even if you get away from your computer and go for a really nice walk to re-energize yourself, rejuvenate yourself. So those are the types of things that not only do I need for myself as a leader, but again, I need my staff to know that's the space that I need them to be in. So they're fresh, so that they're ready to work, that they're able to work, but they know that they are in a position that they can take care of self as well. And I'm a mom of 3. And like I said, I've got two first-time freshmen and I have a 14-year-old. And when they need me, I want to make sure I'm available to them. Do I work really hard, and sometimes I work longer hours? I do, but I do try to always make sure I'm pausing and putting priority on my family. And again, my staff knows that's what I hope that they feel like they can do as well. So leadership really is also about making sure that you're taking care of self, but that you can help your staff understand and know that it's important to you that they take care of themselves as well. And as I've gone through this space of rising to a higher level C-suite leadership role, there are many things that feelings and things that you go through. Sometimes there's some self-doubt, and there are times when there's anxiety around, my goodness, there's a lot going on here. Can I get it all done? I always say, make sure you give yourself some deference and some grace, that it doesn't all have to be solved today. And that it doesn't all have to be solved tomorrow either. But to give yourself an opportunity to make mistakes and to fail fast and to use them as learning opportunities. And I had a conversation with someone one time, and we were talking about failure, because you will fail as a leader. You will fail. And we will all do our best not to, but sometimes those are some of the best teachable moments you will ever have. And it helps you understand how to not make those same mistakes moving forward. It also helps you understand how do you learn and grow, and allow your staff and those reporting to you the room for failure as well. Traditionally, failure has a negative connotation around it. It doesn't always have to, because when you fail, a lot of times what you're doing, you're also innovating, right? You're also transforming. And so it's really important to be able to be in a space that failure isn't that bad word, that it doesn't have those bad connotations associated alongside of it, and to learn from it. And sometimes I know, myself and my teams have failed, and we sit back and we say, oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened, or that was an outcome. And, we take a step back and we regroup and we move forward again. My staff also knows that I want all vantage points. I want folks to come to the table and say, I've got a different thought process around, what you just said. And I'm always in a space to say, tell me why. I'm curious. I want to know your ideas. I want to better understand where you're coming from. I think that having those voices are important to doing our work, and again, learning and growing from each other. And when I was teaching graduate students at Buffalo State College crisis communications, I was teaching an online asynchronous course, and there's less opportunity to have more organic interaction like you do in the classroom. So I found that I really had to work hard at asking them questions and responding to the chat in Blackboard. And we had some really great conversations, and out of that came some really great ideas from the content that I had pulled together for them. And it gave me an opportunity to take a step back and say, wow, I'm going to think about that the next time I teach this class. And I'm going to think about getting a content piece, whether that's a TED Talk or a scholarly article or a speaker to come in on a particular topic. I want to know when a content piece isn't so great, right? I would always ask my students, please let me know if that wasn't a good content piece. I want to be able to grow and learn from the experience as well. And we had a great course. We really had a great course, despite everything that was going on with COVID. But it was an opportunity, again, to push myself out of my boundary, and teaching an online building and teaching an online asynchronous course while working full time, while being a mom. And also, I was doing some consultancy work with another institution as well. And so it helps me understand what are those things I really like. It helps me understand those things that maybe I wouldn't want to try again. But it's always good to push yourself beyond your comfort space and to try new things. And so I say all of that to say that really allow yourself the ability to understand and know what you want. If you want leadership, if you do not want a leadership a role, and that's okay. But if you do, There are wonderful opportunities out there to align yourself with some great people, to really help support what you're looking to do. But again, don't forget that you want to be helping other people while you're on your journey, helping other people along with you as well. Raising your hand, always make sure you raise your hand. There's some amazing experiences out of raising your hand. And there's some experiences that you say, I raised my hand for that. I'm not so sure that's something I want to do again, but boy, did I learn something different, right? Understanding and knowing that your track to leadership doesn't have to be a straight one. It might have some curves, it might have some bends, it might have some side moves, making sure that you understand that's okay too. Making sure, again, that you have experiences outside of your discipline area to help grow your soft skills, to help grow your other skill set areas. And again, I will always advocate for, please ensure that you're being a staunch supporter for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And if you don't know quite how to do that well, work with the DEI professional in your organization. Understand and know what are some of those skill sets that you can obtain to really weave that into how you lead, and how you diversify your staff. Trust me, you will be much better off for it. But I want to leave some time for us to have conversation here, and answer any questions that you might have. I'm absolutely honored to be here having this conversation with you and being in this space with you and talking about non-traditional pathways to leadership. I'm really, really interested who might have some questions, or ways in which I might be able to help you think around how you get to your next leadership roles.
Thank you, Jackie. Please raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask a question. Actually, in the chat, there is one question already.
Okay, so it says you talk about going on a different path in different ways. Do you think you always need to know the end goal? That is a great question. I'm going to stop there. No, right? I think, again, if I had known that my end goal was to be Vice Chancellor for Information Technology, I would have said, I don't think so. I don't see myself doing that work, right? And this position came to me in a very interesting way. It came from a recruiter. I was not looking to move to Minnesota, and it was one of those opportunities when I actually read the position description and then talked to the recruiter. It really piqued my interest. My family is on the East Coast. And it just came sort of out of the blue. And I said, wow, I want to have a conversation around that position. That sounds exceptionally important. I had never worked for a system office before. I had always worked on a campus and liaised with a system office. And a system office, for those who aren't quite understanding what that is, it's much like Buffalo State College and the SUNY system. The Minnesota State system has 37 institutions, multiple campuses, and it really is supported through what we call a system approach. We're all working together under the guise of the Minnesota State system of colleges and universities. And I had a conversation with the chancellor, and he said something that was very, very pivotal for me when I was in the beginning stages of this position, and interviewing. And he said, I am looking for less for a technologist and more for someone who can translate technologies into student success. And I was sold. To have a chancellor who's that passionate around student success, just really sold that for me. And so I think that's a really great question, because sometimes the most wonderful experiences are those experiences that come to us that we would have never walked into otherwise, right? They come to us organically, and there's an opportunity to allow yourself some flexibility around that too, that it doesn't have to be so finite all of the time. One of the questions I got asked when I was interviewing for this position is that, will you feel a sense of loss because you don't have the marketing, communications, and enrollment component to your job anymore. I said, oh gosh, no, because I still do that every day. I'm still talking about enrollment. I'm still talking about the needs of students. I'm still dealing with marketing communications. Here in the Minnesota state system, we are rolling out an enterprise-wide system. It's called NextGen. It's powered by Workday. It will encompass all what we call our operational components of HR and finance and all of our student components as well. It is a massive project, and it's one of the reasons that got me exceptionally excited about coming to the Minnesota state system, because I knew it was going to push me well out of my comfort level. I've done many, many system implementations. This is a single tenant, which means we're all 37 campuses are going to be one environment. We function within one environment from an ERP system perspective. And that is exceptionally exciting. And so I get to do things that I never thought that I'd ever get to do. I get to work with people who are industry leaders, who are exceptional practitioners in their space. And I look forward to that. I look forward to learning from them. I look forward to taking some of my challenges to them. And sometimes, I'm saying, I'm thinking about this in this way, and I'm just stuck. And they come back and they say, have you thought about it this way? And I'll say, I didn't think about it that way. And it's because they just have a different vantage point than I do. And so wow. So yes, absolutely. Leave the end goal open sometimes. You'll be surprised at what comes your way. The other part of that question is, can it evolve along the way? I would say absolutely, and please let it do that, right? Allow it to be organic. Allow it to, if that one job didn't work, okay, fine, right? How do we then move away from that opportunity and say, you know what, how do I redirect myself? Something I always say, just because that's a no doesn't mean not ever, right? And so how do I redirect myself to something that might be a better fit? Was there a reason potentially why I didn't get that job? I have interviewed at many, many different places for jobs I didn't get. And, I would say that, there's lots of great experience in doing that interviewing. There's a lot of great learning lessons, but I got here and I got to this position, and I'm exceptionally grateful for being in this space, right? And so I think there's another question that says, I'm involved in an advisory group for a small city. You mentioned community, and I'm wondering how to address that. In other words, how can I get the city council who created our group to take us seriously? Interesting question. Finding ways in which you can partner with your city council. How can you help have conversation around the issues and the challenges that are important to your group? Find other industry leaders in that space that will help to be advocates to get in front of some of those city council members as well. When I was at Buffalo State College, I worked very closely with the mayor's office on multiple things, on multiple initiatives. And you learn to understand who can help partner in that space to move those initiatives forward. So it's really all about finding those really great advocates. The other part of the question is note that the current members of the council, are not the same ones that created us. That's very interesting, right? So there is certainly a clash of egos. Note, I am by nature snarky, and sometimes things slip out before I can think to keep my mouth closed. So it's good to know yourself, right? It's good to know that those things happen, but it's also good to know when to best use those traits and when it's best to keep those a little closer to you as well. As far as the council members not being the same, I think what's going to be really important for you, if you haven't already done this, is going back and helping them understand why your group was organized in the first place. What are your priorities? What's your plan? Do you have a business plan? Do you have a strategic plan for your initiatives? And helping them really understand and know why this group is so incredibly important to their community, right? Council members and others are there to serve the community. We here in higher education are servant leaders. We are here to serve our students. And I just had this conversation on one of our other campuses today, that my job here as Vice Chancellor of IT is to be of service to you. I'm a public servant. I work in public higher education. I'm not here to tell you how you should be consuming teaching and learning. I'm here to better understand and know what you need, how you need to consume it, and where you need to consume it and when, and to be able to respond my work to those needs. That's the way it works. At the end of the day, you all are consumers. Sometimes that's a bit of a bad word when we talk in higher education, but the reality is you pay for a service, and that service is to become educated so you can increase your economic viability within your own community, right? And so making sure that we function in that way on behalf of you is important. That's what your public servants are supposed to be doing on your behalf, right? They're there to service the community. So that would be the advice that I have for you all in that space. Absolutely, no problem. Any more questions? I'd love to hear any other concerns, ideas, different pathways. Maybe you started in one space and now you're in a different space. Happy to answer any more questions for you all.
Hi, Dr. Malcolm, and thank you so much for doing this.
Of course.
Any advice on individuals? You said moving from one space to another. They're looking to start off as faculty, but end up as senior administration.
Mm-hmm. I would say, that's interesting. As I've moved from administration into the faculty space, more from an adjunct, I know there can be a bit of a rub there as well. What I would say is, whatever direction you're going in, whether it's faculty to administrator or administrator back to faculty, to always ground yourself in both of those spaces, whether you're administrator teaching on a adjunct level, that helps you really, I would say, gain some street cred on the academic side, but vice versa. How do you keep yourself engaged in both arms of the organization? They do tend to function in silos. And I've had that experience on multiple campuses. I would really like to see them not be as siloed as much as they are on some campuses. But my advice would be really allowing yourself to traverse through both of those spaces so you don't lose sight of one or the other, and making sure if you're teaching, in your particular vertical, what does that look like? Are you keeping your content relevant? And things like that. If you're on the administration side, that really happens by default because you're forced to be in the spaces to keep your craft relevant. So I would say keep yourself walking in both of those spaces. If you choose to move into one more fully than the other, I think that's perfectly fine. Just know that within certain institutions of higher education, it might be a bit of a rub to gain your street cred as you traverse through those different spaces.
Thank you.
Sure. Gabriel?
Hi, Dr. Malcolm. Thank you again, ladies, for definitely being here and having this conversation with us. I'm really thinking about, I work as an administrator, and you talked a little bit about silos. And one of the things that I'm trying to navigate in this space is, working with the faculty, working with the staff, but also trying to build that community connection. And it's difficult to do because I'm an office of one. How would you advise to go about some of those things? And I say that, and I work in the space of student success and retention, and trying to bring a campus together as an office of one.
Right. And I think at being an office of one, but at the end of the day, the mission, you're in higher education, the mission is all the same, right? And so we should all be working, especially in your space, for student success. And so when we talk about retention and we talk about things like enrollment, and no matter what we're talking about across an institution of higher education, the reality is we all are here for student success. So as you build your relationships and have your conversations to say, look, I want to be able to do this work with you, because at the end of the day, we need to get our students to graduation and beyond, because that's what we told them we would do for them. Right. And if we continue to have silos, that we're not being the best advocates for our students. Right. Because if I'm keeping my work to myself and I'm not collaborating with you, that then means that in some way, shape or fashion, our student isn't getting our best. Right. They're getting a component of our best. And so it's going to be really, really important to have those conversations in that way, to say, look, my goal is the same goal as yours. How do we get there together? from a retention perspective, any time we lose a student, that's really, I'll say a failure, and I don't mean it in that strong of a way, but it's a loss, right? It's a loss for us. And as we lose that student, where did they go? Right? Did they stop out? Did they stop out because we frustrated them? Did they stop out because we created unknown barriers for them, right? That we didn't know we put into place. And so if we don't work together, then we don't know what that looks like, and we're not doing that work together. And so what happens if we're not working together? That's how we create inequities for our students. And so if we are here truly for higher education and so for student success, then everyone has to be very, very clear in understanding and knowing that if we're functioning in that way, then we're not giving our students our best. So, and sometimes having those conversations in that way resonates with some folks. I sometimes feel like folks are in categories, and I say there's your folks who are, no matter what, they're on board, they're supportive. You've got folks sort of in the midline that they need a little bit of convincing, and then you have your never evers. Those are people you will never convince, no matter what you do, to get on board. And you really got to focus on those first 2/3 of folks to do the work, right? And because that's where you need to put your energy. So that would be the advice that I would give to you, is really continue to build those strong relationships and help people understand and know at the end of the day, the mission is what it is, and we serve who we serve. And that is to make sure we get students to graduation, because at what we're supposed to do, right, especially in public higher education, is we are the ones who really are helping to increase the economic viability of our community members. We can't do that if we're more focused on, who's in our sandbox, right? We all need to be playing in the same sandbox, and the ball can be sent around to all, and we can all play with it, and we all can help our students at the end of the day. So it doesn't have to be that it's yours solely, that it can be a game where everybody wins.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. This is a really great question. Do you ever suffer from imposter syndrome? What do you do to combat it? My goodness, yes, absolutely, right? I'm being perfectly transparent in this space with you that I do, and I do because you don't ever want anyone to perceive that you aren't at your best at all times. And the way I combat that is to say, I don't need to be perfect. What I need to do is make sure I'm learning and growing as a professional. And those teachable moments are really key as well, to make sure that I know that I can lean on those things to say, I probably won't do that again, or I won't do that, a particular thing a particular way again. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like at times I'm not doing things the way a type A personality person would. We think of ourselves as got to be perfect at all times and all ways. There's just no way. At the end of the day, you're a human being, right? You have stressors, you have things at home with family, you have a lot of work when you're at work. You might be transitioning your life. There's a lot of life experiences that go on as well. And part of it goes back to that self-care, taking a step back. And a lot of it is giving yourself that deference and that grace to say, you know what, that happened. I'm acknowledging that happened. And I just got to be able to keep pressing forward. Sometimes I spend a lot of time talking to former colleagues in this space to say, I did this and this happened, and that just didn't work out, and that didn't feel good. And sometimes they'll say, oh, I did that too, but here's what I did to be able to move on from that, and to not hold on to things so tightly that it begins to impact your work in a negative way. So again, good self-care, allowing yourself some deference and grace, and allowing yourself to own it, right? Allowing yourself to say, ooh, that wasn't great. And I think a lot of times too, when something didn't go as well as you want, that we don't necessarily have to be in a position where we have to be apologetic to ourselves. It's just to say, you know what, I've got some learning to do in that space, and I want to go, and I'm open to doing that. But knowing that you're a human being and that failure is part of the way in which we learn. Mm-hmm. So it says here, hopefully the pandemic will end. The sooner the better. Yes, I absolutely agree. Are there ways in which you think the pandemic has permanently altered the landscape concerning student enrollment and graduation outcomes? Absolutely, yes. Emphatically, yes. The way in which we've done things previously really cannot exist in the way in which they have existed. The way we market ourselves to students, to prospective students, is different. The way we get to them now is different. In the pandemic, what we actually went back to is a lot of grassroots types of things, picking up the phone, texting and saying, how can we help you? Sending out, we used to send out micro surveys to say, what content do you want us to cover? Instead of us saying, we think you need content in regards to open house, financial aid, and student accounts, we ask them, what content do you need us to curate for you, right? And that gives you a lot of opportunity to have what you're doing be better received. And so it really helped us really get back to some of those things that are very simple in nature, but so we used our technology, we utilized our past experiences, and we also listened. We listened to what the students needed. And I think what it's done is create a wonderful opportunity for higher education to really turn and move in a direction that really, really is student focused. And that really is in a space that, again, and I said this a little bit earlier, how do we respond to you the way you need us to respond? Not, we believe you need to come to us and we'll grace you with our wonderful presence and teach you, and therefore you'll go out into the world and you'll be fabulous human beings. The reality is competition is real in this space. I think what we've seen is those who do remote learning really, really well, and those who do not. I think we'll begin to see institutions of higher education really paying attention to what the students' needs are in modality, whether they want high flex, whether they want fully on campus, whether they want to be fully online, that now the expectation is there are options, right? And to be able to respond to good quality options, not just to throw courses online, but to do that in a really strong, robust way. How do we create experiences as well? If I'm fully online, how do I create an experience where I remain connected? How do I feel like I have those social experiences as well? All of those things are things that we didn't think about necessarily in those ways prior to the pandemic. I think we're going to be using a lot more social media. I think we're going to be very much in the digital space and using technology a lot more and more creatively. I know when I was at Buffalo State, we implemented things like a chat bot. How do we get our students engaging with us after hours? When you're dealing with a unionized environment, most of the time things shut down at 5 o'clock. Well, guess what? Teaching and learning doesn't stop at 5 o'clock. So how do we get creative around managing our workforce and the way in which our unions are woven into that space? But how do we still respond to a consumer who is running now 24/7, right? They're not shutting off at 5 o'clock saying, well, it's closed and I guess I can't get my question answered. So how do we do those things that better support the student need? The other thing that I think is exceptionally important is being mindful of what our students need and how they need it, especially as they live their lives, right? If I'm a parent and I put my kids to bed, but I got a question at 9 o'clock, I want to be able to get there and get that question answered. So those are some of the things that I would say will begin to really change the space of higher education and the way in which we bring our students on board.
We have time for one more question. It's on the chat box.
Oh, okay. So this last one here. Okay, so you talked about the interviewing one?
Yes.
Okay, so you talked about interviewing, changing jobs. What are some of the early indicators for you that it's time to start looking for a new opportunity? Wow, that's a really great question. I would say don't leap just because you have a difficult situation that happens at work, right? Because that's part of that learning and growing process. What I will say, if something is no longer serving you well, if you are stressed out, If you're finding yourself, you're going to the doctor more, right? You're having to go to the physical therapist because your back is bothering you because you're stressed out. If it's impacting your health and your well-being, it is time. You need to go. Understanding that people are balancing needing a job, right? You don't want to just leave necessarily, but making sure that if something is impacting your health, if it's impacting your family life and your ability to really have time to yourself and with your family, I would say those are some indicators that I would use as opportunity for me to say, this no longer serves me well. I'm going to look at something different.